All right, folks. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever the heck you are, whatever you're doing. I am delighted that you chose to spend some time with me today. Hey, so today we're going to talk to author David E. Nielsen about the 9 dimensions of conscious success. And if you're wondering, can you define your purpose and achieve conscious success? The answer is absolutely. And David breaks it down in this book. We're going to talk about the book and some ideas and how David got started and why this book matters. Because I think this is a book that you want to read. It's going to propel your 2019 and likely your life. So David, good morning. I'm so glad that you're here today.
Good morning, Phil, and thank you for having me. Season's greetings.
Season's greetings. So I got to ask you, first of all, so how did you get Dr. Ken Blanchard to write the foreword, David? That's pretty awesome.
Well, there are, I guess, a couple of lessons from that. Somewhat serendipity, and also ask for what you want in life. It dramatically improves the probability that you'll get it. I had the good fortune to have a very solid mentor and good friend of mine who was close friends with Ken Blanchard. And much later in life, I met Ken through a conference that I attend every year. And as I began to frame the structure for the book and get ready to begin writing, one of the conscious choices that I made was to interview a number of people. And so in the course of being with Ken at the conference that I attend every year, I asked him if he'd be willing to be interviewed. And he was a great interview, and he was very gracious, as he always is. And he said, well, of course, happy to help. And had a great interview with him. And at the end of the interview, he said, by the way, David, I would be happy to write a review for the book if you would like that. And so I said, that is very nice of you to offer, and I certainly will take you up on that. And so off we go, and I'm continuing to write. And as the book was getting close to being published, I really had a sense that he would add some value in writing the foreword, and I didn't want to push his generosity, but at the conference, I was spending time with him, having a cup of coffee, and he asked about the book and again reiterated his willingness to write a review, and I said, I don't want to push the bounds of your generosity, but would you be willing to write the foreword? He said, oh, of course. So he was gracious and he said he was honored that I was willing to ask. And so we worked together as the book was coming together, and he agreed to write the foreword, and we got that done. And he's such a giant in the industry. And so it was more a matter of right place, right time, and being willing to ask. And he was gracious enough to accept.
Awesome. Well, I would also say, though, it's important that you write a good book, because Ken wouldn't have stood behind something that wasn't good. But where did you get the idea even here? Is this something you've been working on? I mean, is this like a culmination of your life's work, David, or did you just wake up one day and say, you know what, this is what needs to be written?
It is more what you referenced there, a culmination of life's work. And I'll tell you, as I turned 60, I started thinking about what my life had meant to me and why it had any sort of meaning. And I had, by that time, a reasonably successful career in management consulting and training. I had trained lots and lots of people in a variety of large companies. And I just had sort of a self-awareness moment around saying, well, you're 60. What does all this mean? All of the things that you did in your life up to this point. And combining with that, I had watched younger people in a variety of my client systems seemingly struggle with, a number of things. And the different generations seem to be, in some organizations, to some degree clashing. There are different value constructs. There are different things that are important to people. And I'm a naturally curious guy, and so I was intrigued by that. And then really one of the key things that struck me was the fact that I'd been extremely fortunate in my life. And when I started looking at some data on millennials and data on cost of living and some things, I quickly arrived at the point of realizing that it's much, much more difficult for people starting out now and are going to be entering the world of work than it was when I started. Another realization that I had was that I was extremely fortunate to have had some wonderful mentors and people that really helped me along the way, most notably my father. So all of that distilled down to the point of saying, gosh, maybe I have a story to tell, number one. Number two, maybe I could share things that I've learned in my journey that would benefit younger people that are starting out, or for that matter, anyone in a business or anyone in a company who aspires to be successful. And the other, I think, element was that my path had been, and I talk about it in the book, my path had been one of sort of trial and error and, making mistakes, receiving feedback, getting clear that, boy, that's something that didn't work very well. Maybe I don't need to repeat that again. And so all of that was then again distilled down into a framework for the book, the interviews that I conducted with a number of people about their notions of success and what helped them be successful. And that's how I came up with the model, the 9 dimensions of conscious success, 3 of the foundational elements, and then 6 differentiators. So that's kind of the story.
Excellent. Excellent. So one of the things that struck me in the book is you make it clear that we have to decide for ourselves what our definition of success is. And that's different. I mean, a lot of times the book will say, well, this is what success is, or it leaves it totally vague. So why is it so important, David, to define for ourselves what success means?
That came also from an epiphany. Number one, it's important to define for yourself what success means, because that means then you own that definition, or you're clear about it. It's yours. It's not a success definition that someone else has provided for you. One of the awarenesses that I had growing up was watching my father and others work, and we lived in a fairly traditional sort of, I always refer to it as either the father knows best or the leave it to beaver kind of life, where my dad worked. My mother was a domestic engineer running a household and raising 3 children and so forth. But the realization was that there was sort of a set expectation about what success was. And that was based on learning, a craft or a trade, or figuring out what it is that you're going to do and work, going to work for a company. And then largely my sense of success back then was sort of rising the corporate ladder, being promoted into positions of additional responsibility. As I began interviewing people and talking particularly to millennials and some of the younger generation, it's abundantly clear, and there's quite a lot of data on this, that the success definition that I might have grown up with may be nothing like what a lot of people are looking at in this day and age. And so in some ways, I think millennials and the generations that are coming after them are more enlightened, if you will, about important things like work-life balance, and things that, money isn't the only goal. Acquiring assets is not the only objective. And certainly being promoted into higher levels of responsibility may not be for everyone. So it became really clear that people need to define success for themselves, and it has nothing to do with what others think, and most especially in writing the book, it has very little to do with what I think success is.
Interesting. That's very, very interesting. I think that really has changed. I think about my father, and I think about how different things were for him. His big success was, he stayed on the farm and kept the family business alive. Right. Which is very different than me as a small business owner, as an entrepreneur who's out there traveling around, coaching, training people. So different. I mean, there's almost no connection there between what he does and what I do. So it's hard to even explain success in those terms. And yet, if we can, I think the fact that we respect each other, we can both agree that we both seen some success, and certainly some failure too, but that we both have some success because of what we've done. And I think is that one of the key elements in the book as well, to help us work better together to have that success?
Absolutely. And I think your story is a great story about the respect between you and your father, even though you took different paths. I can remember at an early age, my father was a survivor, if you will, of the Depression. He was one of those people that Tom Brokaw called a member of the greatest generation. And he served in the war and he survived the Depression. And I remember him at an early age instilling in all the three of us kids, I have two older sisters, the notion that you have to learn how to work. And he said at a very early age, he was by that time a successful executive, but he said, it really doesn't matter what you choose to do in life. Do whatever you want and whatever is meaningful to you, but whatever you do, do it to the very best of your ability. And that was a key message.
Yeah, definitely a key message. And I think that's something that, if taken to heart, can resonate across generations as do the hard work to get the good success.
Right.
Cool. Awesome. So, well, in your model, you've got 3 foundational elements, which I think are very interesting and very different from other success models that I've seen. Number 1 is purpose, 2 is self-awareness, and 3, and I thought this was really interesting, David, social awareness. So talk to us about those 3 foundational pieces and why they are so foundational.
Certainly. As the model came together, and I was influenced by other writers, I say in the very early stages of the book that I'm standing on the shoulders of giants because I'm a voracious reader and I'd read a lot, and I certainly was familiar with Covey's 7 Habits, etc. And one of the things that I was clear about is that I was narrowing down, based on all this interview data, that this was going to be a list of things that I really felt strongly about. And I went into the project with some predispositions about what I thought caused me and others to be successful. And then it was validated by interview data. But one of the things that became clear was, early on, somebody said, well, you've got a list of 9 things. Are any of them more important than the others? And I was already thinking that I had to separate the 9 elements because, for example, the notion of having self-awareness, if you demonstrate, one of the differentiators is humor. If you demonstrate a real propensity for humor, but you do so without self-awareness, then it can go horribly wrong. And I may have learned some of those lessons early in my life. So one of the things that became clear is I needed to separate the 9 things into those things that create a foundation, a solid foundation for the other 6. So I started with, I believe it was Will Rogers who said, the 2 most important days of your life are the day that you're born and the day you figure out why. And so purpose, in a lot of my own journey and personal growth work, has been something that a lot of people have talked about. And Ken references it in the foreword, talking about, everyone should have a purpose, a reason that we get up in the morning. And so it all starts with that, because then you can guide all the other elements of your life based on, am I living my life on purpose or not? Then self-awareness probably came out of a lot of my executive coaching work, where in coaching executives, it became clear that often people operate, particularly people that have been successful, without a lot of self-awareness. They've been successful and they may have been reinforced in doing things that worked for them, but they weren't very conscious. And that's where the whole notion of consciousness comes in. So I said, for any of the work that we do, any of the how you show up in life, so on and so forth, a good foundational element is being aware of how you are. Are you feeling well physically? How are you emotionally? Are you tired? So self-awareness becomes core to almost anything that we do as humans, particularly in producing outcomes or results or achieving goals. And then the second piece of that, oftentimes they're sort of combined, is, do I have high awareness of my impact on others? Whenever I say or do anything, is my impact on others consistent with the intent that I have? And so those are maybe 2 sides of the same coin, but they're different enough that I felt they needed to be separated. So those 3, purpose, self-awareness, social awareness, then form that foundation.
Yeah, I've never heard that social awareness being described that way, but it makes so much sense. I mean, everything we do, the atmosphere that we create around us certainly impacts others. Are we making people comfortable, or are we making them uncomfortable? Are we welcoming, or are we pushing them away? And I think that is foundational. I know that when I was in corporate America many years ago, I recognized that my energy level could absolutely impact people. And when I was down, I recognized that I needed to stay home. My illness was often a depletion of energy, where if a project lost that momentum because I was the one that was weighing us down because of something that was going on with me, that was a problem for us. So I really like that social awareness, David. That's really a strong idea.
The way you articulated it there is great. Your awareness that your impact on others in group settings, so on and so forth. And it could be also as simple as there's some research in the book that the impact on others in terms of their satisfaction, happiness, and general kind of well-being is influenced by smiling. And there's some interesting research on that. So the social awareness piece, because we probably all have encountered people that might be sort of stumbling through life doing what they're doing without real knowledge of how did I impact the other person that I was interacting with.
Yeah, absolutely. Or often even thinking that we do. I think that thinking is the first step, and then understanding is probably the later step for us.
Exactly. Yeah.
Awesome. So you've got 6 differentiators in here as well. You alluded to one before, and that's humor. Gratitude is a big one as well. You've got articulate for impact, listening for results and connections, work ethic, which we also talked about, but then authenticity. Now, David, authenticity is often bandied about as, leaders, salespeople, small business owners, you have to be more authentic. So what does authenticity mean to you, David, in the context of your book about conscious success?
Well, it really is linked to some of those foundational elements. So if I am living my life on purpose, if clear sense of purpose, for example, my purpose is presenting my best self to help individuals and organizations define and achieve their best purpose. So that's my purpose, my personal purpose statement. And it's a good grounding for me to be able to, when things go well, or even if they don't go well in my work, I can look at that foundational element and say, was I authentic in trying to deliver on that purpose? And basically it just means being your true self, not the way that I define it in the book is I never want to deceive myself or others. True honesty, and the first part of that is the critical piece, that I'm not deceiving myself, that I'm operating authentically with my purpose, with who I am as a person, and not trying to be someone that I'm not. And I think some of that also, Phil, came from early learning as I was trying to move up the corporate ladder in a couple of companies, finding myself with any sense of self-awareness, and I had a lot less back then, or at least I'd like to think that today, examining things after the fact and saying, gosh, that was sort of an interesting choice that I made there. That was sort of an interesting comment that I made. What was behind that? Was that because it's truly consistent with what I believe and think? Or was it something that I said out of some sense of insecurity? Or trying to be someone that I'm not. And so having that sort of awareness becomes sort of guided then the notion that had to be one of the differentiators. The other thing that if you have any sense of social awareness and you receive feedback from people, you find out pretty quickly that people can determine whether you're being authentic or not. So it's interesting. I don't think when we're our inauthentic selves, we don't fool very many people, I don't think.
No, well, not for very long anyway, right? I mean, that's
Right.
the thing. More exposure to an inauthentic person leads us to understand that they're really inauthentic. It isn't just a gut feel.
Right. Absolutely. That one of the great quotes that I use in the book was, be yourself, everyone else is taken.
There you
I
go.
like that as a good reminder.
Yeah, absolutely it is. Absolutely it is. So with all of those, I mean, we could dive deep on any one of those, David, but what's one of the other ones that maybe you're most passionate about or you feel has driven the most impact in your work or in the work of others?
Well, I combined two elements in work ethic and personal responsibility. The work ethic piece, again, came from learning at a very early age. My father used to tell all three of us kids that, just so that you can be clear about your future, I work hard, your mother works. We're not going to be leaving you millions and millions of dollars. You're going to have to make it on your own. And so work is the way that you'll be able to earn a fair living and achieve the kinds of things that you may want in life financially. So the whole work ethic, I started at an early age. The influence from both my parents was, get out and do something. Even during the summers when I was out of school, they didn't want me sitting around, or any of us sitting around inside watching TV. In this day and age, there are different distractions, but the point was, get out and do something. So, from the age of 9 or 10, I was either mowing lawns or I had a paper route or I was doing things. And the great thing about that was it gave me a sense of purpose, and it also really helped me understand the value of money, the value of doing something and getting paid for it. So the work ethic piece was pretty basic. The other piece came later in life. There was a fellow by the name of Martin Root, I believe he's Canadian, who taught a concept called 100% responsibility. And so I learned it after being quite skeptical of it for a while. In fact, I went through several workshops where it was taught. As part of my work, working for a large consumer products company. I worked for the Coors Brewing Company for 15 years. And as I was learning this concept, and quite honestly resisting it early on, at one point there was some sort of an epiphany, or the page turned, and all of a sudden I thought, this really is real. This is not conceptual. It works, and it's a excellent way to be personally responsible. And fundamentally, it takes about an hour to go through the whole model, and I describe it in that chapter in the book. But fundamentally, the notion is that you are 100% responsible for all the results that you produce in your life, and everyone else is zero, which is designed to eliminate blaming and justifying. And in business, as well as most elements of life, it's frustrating when you're dealing with others and results aren't getting produced, or things are falling short of what you hope for. And there's often no shortage of excuses or blaming. The reason that I didn't get it done was old Fred, fell down on the job, didn't do his part, or whatever it might be. But it really resonated with me that, blaming and justifying is really never a productive behavior, and it really gets in the way of what you're trying to do. So that one probably, the work ethic and personal responsibility dimension is really important to me.
Excellent. Well, good stuff. So lots of great stuff in the book, The 9 Dimensions of Conscious Success. So David, you mentioned that you're a reader and you like to read. So besides for your book, what are a couple books that you've found that's helped shape your thinking, or that maybe you're looking forward to reading in 2019 and beyond?
Yeah, some that I will read and a couple that I have read. One, Sean Aker is an interesting guy. He's an interesting author, and he's written several books, and he wrote a book called The Happiness Advantage, which I was really intrigued by. I saw him speak, and that influenced me a lot. I'm a big Patrick Lencioni fan, and there are three that I have read or are in the process of reading. Number one, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. Number 2, The Ideal Team Player. Number 3, The Advantage. All of them are really great. He's quite adept at telling a good story and teaching a lesson at the same time. And, there were classics over the years. I remember many years ago reading In Search of Excellence by Tom Peters, and also then learning 4 or 5 years later the fleeting notion of excellence when some of the companies that he had highlighted were really struggling. And And that's not a slam on Tom Peters. He was a very successful writer. So a number of things, and I try to mix in, a little fiction with those kinds of things. But those are some books that I've been influenced by. And of course, Ken Blanchard, the original 1 Minute Manager, was solid, and he has some recent books about health now that are really terrific as well. So those are some of the influences.
Awesome. Big Sean Aker fan as well. I had Tom Peters on to talk about his latest book several months ago. Fantastic guy. Really good insights. Even yet today, that book was written almost 40 years ago now, In Search of Excellence.
And even though the tide turned for some of those companies, the lessons were critical. It was the lessons that you took out of, and it kind of speaks to an overarching thing that is important to all of us, and that is, how do we think? How do we think and analyze? Analytical skills, and how do we look at a situation? And you can see it in a lot of organizations that some people look at the situation and look at it on its surface and say, well, here are the conclusions. Other people want to dive below the surface and not just look at symptoms, but look at root cause and say, what's really causing this? Somebody many years ago came up with a great model for this that I've used in my work, and that is the 5 whys. That you ask a question and say, why is that? And then you ask why again. Doing that 5 times gets you to a much deeper level of analysis.
Yeah, absolutely. So leaning on the shoulders of giants is what this book is all about, and helping you be more conscious in your success. As David says in the subtitle, it's all about you. So it's the 9 dimensions of conscious success. If you want to check it out more, go to Conscious Success. That does have a lot of S's there. So conscioussuccess.com is the website. And David, if people have questions or they want to interact with you more, is there a social media channel that you frequent that they can ask questions at?
We're working with a company now that we're certainly prominent or becoming more prominent on Facebook, Twitter. We also are launching a new website in January, and we'll be doing a webinar. And if you go to conscioussuccess.com, there's a way for people to get a hold of me and get in touch with me through my business, DNA Worldwide. And the other thing that I would offer here in terms of helping people in their own journey is we've created an online assessment. So you can go online and take this assessment, and it gives you very direct feedback on each of the 9 dimensions. As well, it gives you specific recommendations. If you score a little bit lower on one of the items or one of the dimensions, it gives you recommendations for how you can shore that up. And it ties to the action plans at the end of each chapter in the book.
Excellent. So folks, check out conscioussuccess.com. Get yourself a copy of David's book. Get to know David Nielsen. This is great stuff. David, thank you so much for spending some time with us today.
Phil, thank you for creating the opportunity. I wish you the best in 2019, and good luck with the 3 action steps that you got there for 2019.
Thank you very much. It'll be an exciting year. Thanks, David.
Thank you very much.